My chosen family are the ones who make me happy, Grace said, raising her glass, and everyone applauded. Then she looked directly at me and declared, "You can leave." I stood up trembling, but Theodore also stood up, and what he did next left everyone speechless. But let me tell you how we got to that moment that changed my life forever. 3 hours earlier, I was in my room finishing getting ready for my daughter's wedding. My wine-colored dress was perfectly ironed, every wrinkle removed, with the care of someone who wanted to be flawless. At 67, I still worried about making a good impression on Grace. The rose perfume I had sprayed on my wrists mixed with the scent of coffee cooling on my bedside table. I had barely eaten a piece of toast for breakfast. My nerves wouldn't allow for more. Today was the most important day of my daughter's life, and I wanted to be perfect for her. As I put on the pearl earrings that had belonged to my mother, I remembered all the nights I stayed up taking care of Grace when she was little. The fevers I brought down with damp cloths, the stories I read to her until she fell asleep, the sacrifices I made working double shifts so she could study at the best university. Everything will change today, I told myself in front of the mirror, practicing my smile. Today, my daughter will see me. She will value me. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Victoria, my younger sister. "Amelia, how are you feeling? Are you ready for the big day?" "More than ready," I replied, feeling my eyes fill with emotional tears. "I have a feeling that today everything will be different between Grace and me." Victoria was silent for a moment. She knew our history. She knew how complicated our relationship had been in recent years. Since Grace moved in with Theodore, the visits had become scarcer. The calls colder, the encounters more tense. "Just take care of yourself, sister, don't expect too much." But I had already made my decision. Today would be the day of our reconciliation. Today my daughter would give me the place I deserved in her life after so many years of coldness and distance. I took the gift I had prepared for the couple, a fine china set that I had been paying for in installments for a whole year. Each plate represented an apology, each cup was a chance to start over. I had sold my wedding ring to be able to pay for it in full. The taxi arrived promptly at 2 in the afternoon. Throughout the entire journey to the church, I couldn't stop smiling as I imagined the moment Grace would see me. I visualized the hug we would share, the sweet words we would exchange, the mutual forgiveness that would seal our wounds. The church was decorated with white and pale pink flowers. It was beautiful, exactly as Grace had always dreamed. I had arrived early to make sure I got a good seat, preferably in the front row where she could see me throughout the ceremony. But when I approached the first pews, the wedding planner stopped me. "Excuse me, ma'am, those seats are reserved for the immediate family." "I am the mother of the bride," I said with a proud smile. The man checked his list and frowned. "I'm sorry, but it says here that you should sit in the 5th row." My smile faded. The 5th row, as if I were just any guest, as if I hadn't been the one who had given my life for that child who was about to become a wife. I sat where I was told, surrounded by strangers, while I watched the first pews fill up with Theodore's friends, Grace's co-workers, people who had appeared in her life long after I had. When the music started and I saw my daughter walking towards the altar, beautiful in her white dress, with that radiant smile I had known since she was a baby, I felt my heart fill with love and hope. Surely all of this was just a misunderstanding. Surely at the reception things would be different. The ceremony was perfect. Theodore seemed like a good man, and the way he looked at Grace reassured me. At least my daughter had found someone who truly loved her. That was the only thing that mattered, right? When the ceremony ended, I approached to congratulate them, but there were so many people that I could barely give Grace a quick kiss on the cheek. "You look beautiful, my love," I whispered. She barely smiled at me before turning to other guests. The reception was held in an elegant hall overlooking the garden. The tables were decorated with fresh flower centerpieces and candles that created a magical atmosphere. I arrived with my gift under my arm, looking for the table where I had been assigned. When I found my place, my heart sank a little more. Table number 8 at the back of the hall next to the kitchen, so far from the main table that I could barely see the bride and groom. My table companions were people who clearly didn't know anyone else, obligation guests who had been relegated like me. "Are you a relative of the bride?" an elderly lady sitting next to me asked. "I am her mother," I replied, trying to maintain my composure. The woman looked at me with surprise, clearly confused as to why the mother of the bride was sitting so far from the head table. I wondered the same thing. From my seat I watched as Grace received congratulations, laughed with her friends, and hugged Theodore's mother with an affection I didn't remember receiving from her in years. Every gesture hurt like a small stab in my chest. When it was time to serve dinner, I saw how the waitresses served the main tables first. By the time they got to ours, the food was already lukewarm. The chicken I tasted was a disappointment, and the wine failed to soothe the bitterness growing in my throat. Throughout the entire dinner, I waited for Grace to come and greet me, to come over and ask how I was to include me in the family conversations. But she was too busy attending to everyone else. I was invisible on the most important day of her life. When it was time for the toasts, my heart quickened. Maybe now, maybe during her speech, she would mention me. Maybe she would thank me for everything I had done for her, for all the sacrifices, for all the love I had given her. Theodore spoke first. He thanked his parents, his friends, his co-workers. He talked about his new family, about the dreams he shared with Grace. It was a beautiful speech full of love and gratitude. When he finished, everyone applauded excitedly. Then Grace stood up. She was radiant, her cheeks flushed with emotion, and perhaps from the champagne. She took the glass and smiled at all the guests. "I want to thank all the special people who are here with me today," she began. "To the friends who have become siblings, to the colleagues who have become family." My breathing quickened. Here it came. Here she would mention me. "I've learned that family isn't always the one who shares your blood," she continued, and I felt something break inside my chest. The real family are those people who choose to be with you, who support you, who make you grow. The words hit me like stones. Every sentence was a rejection. Every smile of hers was a slap in the face to everything I had been for her. "My chosen family are the ones who make me happy," she said, raising her glass higher, and all the guests applauded enthusiastically. "Those who celebrate my achievements without envy, who push me forward without judging me." I kept waiting, clinging to the last hope that maybe at the end of her speech there would be a word for me, a single word that would justify my presence there. But then her eyes met mine. For the first time all night, she looked directly at me. And what I saw in that look was not love, not gratitude, not even indifference. It was pure contempt. "And I also want to say," she continued without taking her eyes off me, "that there are people who don't deserve to be in this special moment. People who only bring negativity and bitterness into our lives." The hall fell silent. All faces turned towards me because it was obvious who she was referring to. My face burned with shame, but I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. "Mom," she said finally, and that word I had so longed to hear sounded like a sentence. "You can leave." The silence that followed was deafening. 200 people looked at me, some with surprise, others with morbid curiosity, some with pity. I felt like the world was collapsing around me. My hands trembled as I placed the napkin on the table. My wine-colored dress, which I had ironed with such care, now felt like a ridiculous costume. I stood up slowly with all the dignity I had left, but then something unexpected happened. Theodore, who had been sitting next to Grace, also stood up. His eyes shone in a way I hadn't seen before, and his jaw was tense with anger. Theodore rose from his chair with an expression I had never seen before. His eyes, which moments before had shone with happiness, were now filled with a cold anger that made the entire hall hold its breath. "What are you doing?" Grace whispered, pulling on his arm to make him sit down again. But he broke free from her grasp and walked towards the microphone. His black suit looked impeccable, but his face showed a determination that sent a chill down my spine. He took the microphone with steady hands and looked directly at my daughter. "Grace, before your mother leaves, I think there are a few things everyone here should know." My daughter had turned as white as a sheet. "Theodore, no, don't do this." "Don't do what?" "Tell the truth." His voice echoed throughout the hall. "Because it turns out I do know the truth about your mother." I was still standing by my table, not knowing whether to stay or go. My legs were trembling so much that I had to hold on to the back of the chair. All the guests were looking at us as if we were part of a show. When we started dating 3 years ago, Grace always spoke ill of her mother. Theodore continued without taking his eyes off my daughter. She told me she was a bitter, controlling woman who was always criticizing everything she did. Grace had risen from her chair and was walking towards him. "Theodore, please don't go on." She told me that her mother had never supported her, that she had always put obstacles in her way, that she was a burden, a toxic person it was better to stay away from. Every word was like a hammer hitting my heart. Is this how my daughter described me to the person she loved? Is this how she had been talking about me all these years? I believed her. Theodore continued because I trusted her, because I thought I knew the woman I was going to marry. But a month ago, I decided to investigate on my own. Grace had reached him and was trying to snatch the microphone from him. Enough. This is our wedding. Exactly, Grace. Our wedding. And I can't marry someone who is capable of lying like this. The hall was completely silent. Even the waitresses had stopped moving. Everyone was waiting to find out what Theodore had discovered. I went to talk to Ms. Victoria Amelia's sister. He continued pointing at me. I wanted to know the full version of the family story before I got married. And what I discovered left me speechless, Victoria. My sister had spoken with him. I felt a mixture of terror and hope. What could she have told him? It turns out that Amelia is not the bitter woman Grace described to me. It turns out she is a woman who was widowed when her daughter was 12, a woman who worked 18 hours a day to raise her daughter alone. Theodore walked to the center of the hall, dragging the microphone with him. Grace followed him with tears in her eyes, but she no longer looked angry. She looked desperate. Amelia sold her house, her jewelry, her furniture, everything of value she had to pay for Grace's private university. She worked as a maid, as a waitress, as whatever was necessary so that her daughter never lacked anything. I put my hands to my chest. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't believe Theodore knew all that. When Grace graduated from university, instead of thanking her mother, she moved to another city. She left Amelia alone after this woman had sacrificed her entire life for her. "Theodore, please," Grace shouted, but he didn't stop. "And during these 3 years we've been together, do you know how many times Grace has gone to visit her mother? How many times has she called her to ask how she is?" The silence was so thick you could cut it with a knife. 3 times. 3 times in 3 years. And every time Amelia called her, Grace rejected the call. Every time her mother sent her a message, Grace ignored it. Tears started rolling down my cheeks without my being able to control them. All those unanswered calls, all those messages read but not answered. He knew everything. But what impressed me the most, Theodore continued, was discovering that Amelia continued to send Grace money during her first year after university. Money she needed for her own expenses, for her medicine, for her food. Grace had stopped in the center of the hall. She no longer tried to stop him. She was standing there, her white dress seeming to have lost all its shine, crying silently. And when Grace finally got a stable job, do you know what she did? She told her mother she didn't need her anymore, that it was time for each of them to go their own way. Theodore approached me. His eyes no longer showed anger, but a deep sadness. "Mrs. Amelia, I didn't know any of this when I invited you to this wedding. I thought you were the terrible woman Grace had described to me. But now I know that you are the bravest and most generous woman I have ever met." Theodore got closer to me, and his voice became softer but no less firm. The entire room remained in absolute silence, as if 200 people had stopped breathing at the same time. "Mrs. Amelia, when Victoria told me your story, I couldn't believe it. She told me that you even sold your wedding ring to pay for Grace's last university semesters, that you worked cleaning offices at night after your day job, so she could study without worries. My heart was beating so hard, I thought everyone could hear it." Theodore's words echoed in the room like bells, each one more painful than the last. He told me that when Grace got sick with appendicitis in her second year of university, you went into debt to pay for a private clinic, because the public doctors said she had to wait, that you stayed awake for 3 days straight taking care of her. Grace was crying now, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of shame, of guilt, of desperation. Her perfect makeup had smudged, and her wedding dress no longer seemed like a symbol of a new beginning, but the disguise of a lie that was crumbling. Victoria also told me that you never remarried, never had another partner, because you said your priority was to be a good mother, that you rejected 3 marriage proposals because those men did not accept that Grace was the most important thing in your life. Every word from Theodore was like a slap to my daughter, but also like a balm for my wounds. For the first time in years, someone saw my sacrifice. Someone understood what it meant to raise a daughter alone. And do you know what else Victoria told me? Theodore continued now, walking towards Grace. She told me that Amelia keeps all the photos of her daughter from when she was a baby until now, that she has a whole album of all her achievements, all her graduations, all her important moments. Grace sobbed louder. She knew it was true. She knew that in my small apartment there was a whole wall dedicated to her, with every diploma, every photograph, every memory of her life. She told me that Amelia speaks of you with pride to all her neighbors, that she boasts that her daughter is a university graduate, that she has a good job, that she is going to marry a good man, that despite everything you love her unconditionally. Theodore stopped in front of Grace and looked at her intently. His voice became harsher. But what hurt me the most to know, Grace, was that when I proposed to you and asked if you wanted to invite your mother, you told me that she didn't deserve to be at our special day, that she was a resentful woman who would only bring trouble. The silence grew even denser. Some guests began to whisper among themselves, but most continued to watch the scene as if it were a play. I insisted on inviting her because I thought maybe you could reconcile, but you put her at the back table as if she were a stranger. You gave her the worst seat in the entire hall. Grace tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. She could only sob and shake her head. And now in your own wedding speech you publicly humiliate her. You throw her out of here as if she were an intruder when she is the woman who gave her whole life for you. Theodore turned to me again. Mrs. Amelia, I cannot marry a woman capable of treating her own mother like this. I cannot start a family with someone who is capable of such contempt for the person who has loved her the most. Grace let out a cry that sounded like a wounded animal. No, Theodore, please, we can fix this. But he had already made his decision. He took off his wedding ring and placed it on the main table. Victoria gave me more than just information about her mother, Grace. She taught me a lesson about the kind of person I want to be, about the kind of family I want to build. He walked towards me and gently took my hands. Mrs. Amelia, I am so sorry you had to go through this humiliation. You don't deserve this. You deserve your daughter's love and respect. You deserve to be treated like the hero you are. My tears were no longer of pain, but of an emotion I didn't know how to name. For the first time in years, someone truly saw me. Someone understood my story. Ladies and gentlemen, Theodore said, addressing the entire room, I regret to inform you that this wedding will not take place. I cannot join my life with someone who is capable of such contempt for her own family. The murmur in the hall turned into a deafening roar. Some guests got up from their seats, others took out their phones to record, others just stared with their mouths open. Grace fell to her knees in the middle of the room, her white dress spread around her like the broken wings of a fallen angel. Mom, she cried out to me. Mom, please tell him to stay. Tell him everything can be fixed. But I had already started walking towards the exit. I walked to the exit of the room with trembling legs, but with my head held high. Every step echoed in my ears like a drum. The whispers of the guests intensified behind me, but I no longer paid them any attention. For the first time in years, I felt seen, validated, respected. Mom, wait! Grace's desperate cry cut through the air like a knife. Please don't leave like this. I stopped at the door without turning around. Her voice sounded broken, completely different from the confident and haughty woman who had given the speech minutes before. Theodore, please, I heard her plead between sobs. It can't end like this. We can talk, we can fix things. But when I turned slightly, I saw that Theodore was no longer in the room. He had left through another door, taking with him not only his presence, but also all of my daughter's hope of keeping her perfect life intact. I left the room and sat on a bench in the garden. The cool air hit my face, and for the first time all night I could breathe deeply. The lights from the room filtered through the windows, and I could hear the chaos that had erupted inside. My phone rang. It was Victoria. Amelia. I just got a call from Theodore. He told me what happened. Are you okay? I'm confused, I answered with a trembling voice. I don't know what to feel. Feel proud, sister. For the first time in years, someone defended your honor. But, Grace, my daughter, your daughter just received the most important lesson of her life, and let's hope she learns it. As I was talking to Victoria, I saw some people starting to leave the room. Theodore's relatives mainly walking towards their cars with faces of disbelief. Some of Grace's guests were also leaving clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation. Victoria: I don't know what I'm going to do now. I don't know how to go on after this. You're coming to my house tonight. We'll talk. We'll cry if we need to. And tomorrow we'll plan your new life. My new life. Yes, Amelia. A life where you don't have to beg for your daughter's love. A life where you are valued for who you really are. As I ended the call, I saw Grace coming out of the room. Her dress was wrinkled, her makeup completely smudged, and she walked as if every step hurt her. She saw me sitting on the bench and ran towards me. Mom, please forgive me, she said, falling to her knees in front of me. I know I was wrong. I know I was terrible to you. I looked at her for a long moment. This woman kneeling in front of me was my daughter, the child I had held in my arms, to whom I had sung lullabies, for whom I had sacrificed my life. But she was also the woman who had just publicly humiliated me, who had spoken ill of me for years, who had made me feel invisible and insignificant. Grace, I said with a soft but firm voice, do you know how many times in these 3 years I thought about calling you just to hear your voice? She shook her head, crying. Every day for 3 years I picked up the phone and dialed your number, but I would hang up before it rang because I knew you wouldn't answer. Mom, do you know how many nights I stayed awake wondering what I had done wrong? At what point did I stop being a good mother to you? Her sobs intensified. You never stopped being a good mother. I was a terrible daughter. Do you know what's the saddest thing about all of this, Grace? That I had to find out from the fiancé you lost how much you hate me. That for 3 years I thought you were just busy with your new life, but it turns out you actively despised me. I don't hate you, Mom. I've never hated you. But you don't love me either, do you? At least not the way I love you. Grace fell silent because she knew it was true. Mom, Theodore left me. I lost the love of my life because of what I did. No, Grace. You lost the love of your life because of who you are, because of the decisions you made, because of the way you treated the family that gave you life. I got up from the bench and started walking towards the street where Victoria had told me she would be waiting. Where are you going? What am I going to do without Theodore? What am I going to do without you? I stopped and finally turned to her. You're going to learn to live with the consequences of your actions. You're going to learn that love is not something you can take without giving anything in return. And maybe if you're lucky, you'll learn to be a better person. But you're my mother, you can't abandon me. I never abandoned you, Grace. You were the one who abandoned me. I saw Victoria's car approaching down the street. It was time to go. If you ever really want to be my daughter, you know where to find me. But I'm not going to chase you anymore. I'm not going to beg for your love anymore. I've already paid too much for something that should have been free. I got into Victoria's car with my legs trembling and my heart beating so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. My sister looked at me through the rearview mirror with a mixture of concern and pride that I hadn't seen in her eyes for years. How are you feeling? She asked as she started the engine. Like I've woken up from a nightmare that lasted 3 years, I replied, wiping the tears that were still streaming down my cheeks. During the journey to her house, neither of us spoke much. I looked out the window at the city lights passing by like shooting stars, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel completely lost. Hurt, yes. Devastated by the way the night had ended, yes, but also freed from a burden I had been carrying without realizing it. When we arrived at Victoria's house, she made me a chamomile tea and we sat in her living room with the dim lights and the comfortable silence that only exists between sisters who have known each other forever. Amelia, there's something I didn't tell you when I spoke with Theodore. Victoria began stirring her tea slowly. What is it? He didn't just come to ask me about your relationship with Grace. He came because he was genuinely worried about you. He told me that on the few occasions he had seen you, he noticed that you seemed sad, that there was something in your eyes that didn't match the description Grace had given him of you. I remained silent, processing this information. He told me that when Grace spoke ill of you, he always felt that something didn't add up, that a woman as terrible as she described you couldn't have raised someone as successful as her. Did he really say that? His exact words were, "If Amelia were really the bitter and destructive woman Grace describes, how is it possible that she managed to raise a university-educated, independent, and professional daughter?" That question bothered him. I felt a strange warmth in my chest. Theodore had seen something in me that my own daughter had refused to recognize. "Victoria, do you think I'm a bad mother? Do you think I did something that deserved the treatment I received?" My sister put down her cup and took my hands. "Amelia, you were the best mother a girl could have had. You raised Grace alone after Michael died. You worked day and night to give her everything she needed. You sacrificed in ways that even I didn't fully understand. So, why does she hate me so much?" "I don't think she hates you, sister. I think she fears you. She fears me. Why? Because you represent everything she never wanted to be. You represent sacrifice, selflessness, a simple life." Grace always wanted to be sophisticated, independent, modern, and in her mind, having a mother who sacrificed so much for her made her feel guilty and small. Victoria's words echoed in my head like bells. Maybe she was right. Maybe Grace's rejection had nothing to do with me, but with her own inability to deal with the guilt of having received so much love without knowing how to return it. "Do you know what's the most ironic thing of all?" Victoria continued. "That by trying to get away from you, Grace missed the opportunity to know an incredible woman. She missed the opportunity to learn from your strength, your generosity, your capacity to love unconditionally." My phone rang, interrupting our conversation. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Amelia." The voice on the other end was a young man's. "Yes, who is this?" "It's Theodore. I hope I'm not bothering you by calling." My heart raced. "No, not at all. How are you?" Honestly devastated, but also relieved. "I wanted to call you to apologize." "Apologize for what?" "For not discovering the truth sooner. For allowing Grace to treat you badly for so long. For not insisting on getting to know you better from the beginning." I felt my eyes welling up with tears again. "Theodore, you have nothing to apologize for. What you did today, no one has defended my honor like that in years. Mrs. Amelia, there's something else I want to tell you. After I left the hall, I went to talk to some of Grace's friends who were at the wedding. I wanted to better understand how she became the person she is. And what did you discover? That you are not the only person Grace has treated badly. Her coworkers told me that she always speaks disparagingly of people she considers inferior to her. Her boss told me that she is known for being cruel to the cleaning staff, to the waiters, to anyone in a service position. Those words hurt me more than anything that had happened at the wedding. At what point had my sweet little girl turned into a person capable of despising other human beings? I think I saved myself from marrying someone who is not the person I thought she was." Theodore continued. "And you saved yourself from continuing to be emotionally abused by someone who didn't value your love. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. I just want you to know that there are people in this world who value you, who see your kindness, who recognize everything you've done, and that you deserve much more than what you've received." When I hung up the phone, Victoria was looking at me with a sad smile. "See, I told you. That boy saw in you what Grace refused to see." That night I slept at Victoria's house for the first time in years, and to my surprise, it was the most peaceful night I had had in a long time. I woke up at dawn feeling something strange in my chest. It wasn't exactly happiness, but it wasn't the crushing sadness I had carried for so long either. It was something like peace. Victoria was already awake, making coffee in the kitchen. The aroma transported me back to our childhood when Mom would make us breakfast before school and everything seemed simpler. "Good morning, sister. How did you sleep?" "Different," I replied as I poured myself a cup as if I had left something very heavy behind. As we had breakfast, my phone started ringing insistently. It was Grace. I declined the call. It rang again. I declined it again. On the third call, Victoria looked at me. "Are you going to answer her?" "Not today. Maybe not for several days. I need time to process everything that happened. That sounds good. For the first time in years, you are in control of this relationship. But Grace didn't give up easily. When I didn't answer her calls, she started sending text messages. First were desperate apologies, then reproaches, then pleas, and finally veiled threats about her emotional state. Mom, please answer. I'm heartbroken. I can't live without Theodore. It's all my fault, but it's also your fault for not teaching me to value what I had. I'm thinking of doing something drastic if you don't help me. Victoria read the messages over my shoulder and shook her head. It's pure emotional manipulation. Amelia, exactly what she has been doing to you for years, only now she's more desperate. She was right, but that didn't make it any less painful to read those words from my own daughter. 3 days later, while Victoria and I were organizing some of my things that I had gone to get from my apartment, someone knocked on the door. It was Grace, but not the perfect, put-together Grace I had seen at the wedding. This Grace had deep, dark circles, dirty hair carelessly tied back, and clothes that looked like they had been worn for several days. Mom, please, I need to talk to you. Victoria stood between us. Grace, your mother is not ready to see you yet. She's my mother. I have the right to talk to her. No, I said, appearing from behind Victoria. You no longer have any right over me that I don't decide to give you. Grace looked genuinely surprised by my response. She was used to me immediately giving in to any of her demands. Mom, please. Theodore left me. I lost my job because I haven't been able to function since the wedding. I'm losing my apartment because I can't pay the rent. I need you. You need me. Or do you need me to solve your problems like I've always done? Both. You're my mother. You're supposed to help me when I'm in trouble. There it was. The expectation that I should save her without her having to give anything in return. The same toxic dynamic that had defined our relationship for years. Grace, at any point during these 3 days, have you asked yourself how I feel, how the public humiliation you put me through affected me? She fell silent, clearly not having considered that possibility. Have you wondered if I'm also suffering? If I also need emotional support after discovering that my only daughter has been speaking ill of me for years, Mom? No, Grace. For years you have trained me to put your needs before mine, to sacrifice my well-being for yours. But not anymore. What do you mean? I mean that if you want to have a relationship with me, it's going to be on my terms. You're going to have to prove to me that you value my presence in your life, not just the problems I can solve for you. I'm asking for your forgiveness. No, you're asking for a rescue. There's a very big difference. Victoria put a hand on my shoulder, a silent gesture of support. Grace, I continued, if you really want my forgiveness, you're going to have to work to earn it. You're going to have to show me that you understand the damage you did to me and that you are willing to change. How? What do you want me to do? First, I want you to go to therapy. I want you to understand why you are capable of treating the people who love you so badly. That's ridiculous. Second, I want you to reflect on why you lost Theodore. It wasn't because I ruined your wedding. It was because he saw who you really are, and he didn't like what he saw. Grace started to cry, but this time her tears seemed more genuine. Third, if one day after doing that inner work you want to try to rebuild our relationship, you're going to have to start from scratch. You're going to have to get to know me as a person, not just as your problem-solving mother. I don't know how to do that. That's your job to learn. I already did my job raising you and giving you all the tools to be a good person. What you do with those tools now is completely up to you. Grace stood at the door for a moment longer, as if waiting for me to give in to go back to my usual pattern of rescuing her immediately. But this time I didn't. Mom, what if I can't? What if I'm not capable of changing? Then you're going to have to live with the consequences of your decisions. Like any adult, I watched her walk slowly down the street with her shoulders slumped and her head bowed. For the first time in my life, I didn't run after her to comfort her. 2 weeks after that encounter with Grace, I received a call that would change my perspective unexpectedly. It was Theodore. Mrs. Amelia, I hope I'm not disturbing you. Could we meet for coffee? There's something important I want to propose to you. He met me at a downtown coffee shop, a small, cozy place that smelled of cinnamon and freshly brewed coffee. When I arrived, he was already waiting for me at a table by the window. He looked different, thinner, with a nascent beard that made him look older, but his eyes retained the same honesty he had shown at the wedding. "Thank you for coming," he said, standing up to greet me. "I know this must be strange for you." "A little," I admitted as I sat down. "But after what you did for me, I feel I owe you at least to hear you out." Theodore ordered 2 coffees and fell silent for a moment, as if organizing his thoughts. "Mrs. Amelia, I've been thinking a lot about you these past 2 weeks. About your story, about everything you sacrificed for Grace, about the injustice of how you've been treated. That's very kind of you, but— No, let me finish, please. I've made a decision that might seem crazy to you, but I need to tell you about it." He looked me straight in the eye. "I want you to be my partner in a project I'm starting. Your partner I don't understand. I'm an architect, as you know. But I've always had a dream of creating a community center for older women who have gone through situations similar to yours. Women who have been made invisible by their own families, who have given everything and haven't received the recognition they deserve." I felt my heart race. "I've been researching, and there are thousands of women like you, especially in our community. Women who raise their children alone, who sacrifice their whole lives and are now alone because their children no longer need them. Theodore, that sounds beautiful, but I don't know anything about running a community center. But you know everything about being a strong woman who has overcome adversity. You know everything about sacrifice, about resilience, about loving unconditionally. That's exactly what these women need to see, that it's possible to rebuild yourself after being discarded by those we love most." His words resonated within me like music. For the first time in years, someone was offering me the chance to use my experience for something meaningful, something bigger than my own pain. I have the plans, I have part of the funding, I have the permits. What I'm missing is someone who truly understands the women we're going to serve. Someone who can be an example that you can get through it. Why me? You barely know me. Because at that wedding, when you got up from that table with all the dignity in the world, when you walked towards the exit with your head held high, despite the humiliation, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. I saw a woman who hadn't given up. I saw pure strength. Theodore took a folder from his briefcase and placed it on the table. "These are the blueprints. The center would have craft workshops, support groups, recreational activities, even a small cafe where women can work and generate income. Everything designed for women like you." I opened the folder and saw detailed drawings of a beautiful building with gardens, spacious rooms full of light, cozy spaces designed to make people feel valued and respected. "Theodore, this is incredible, but I don't have money to invest. I don't need your money. I need your soul, your experience, your wisdom. I need you to help me understand what these women really need, because I can design the most beautiful building in the world. But if you don't understand the heart of the people who are going to use it, it will be useless." As he spoke, I saw an elderly woman walking alone down the street through the windows, carrying grocery bags with difficulty. She reminded me of myself a few weeks ago. Invisible, carrying a weight no one else wanted to carry, with no one to notice her effort. "Do you really think I could do it? Mrs. Amelia, you raised a daughter alone, worked multiple jobs, survived widowhood, maintained your dignity despite emotional abuse, and when the time came, you had the courage to say enough. If that doesn't qualify you to help other women find their strength, I don't know what would." I felt my eyes welling up with tears, but this time they were not tears of pain. They were tears of hope, of possibility of a future I hadn't imagined. "There's something else," Theodore continued. "Grace has been calling me." My heart stopped. "What has she told you? That she wants us to get back together? That she has learned her lesson? That she is willing to change? That you have already forgiven her? And that everything can go back to the way it was before?" "That's not true. I know that's why I'm telling you, because I want you to know that regardless of what happens with Grace, you have value in yourself. You have a purpose that goes beyond being the mother of someone who doesn't value you." Theodore leaned forward. "Mrs. Amelia, I invite you to use all that love you've been giving without receiving anything in return to help women who really need it and will value it. I invite you to become the hero of your own story. I looked at the blueprints again, imagining myself in those spaces surrounded by women who would understand my story, who would value my experience, who would see me as someone strong instead of someone broken. "When do we start?" I asked. 6 months later, I was standing in front of the mirror in my new apartment, getting ready for the inauguration of the New Dawn Women's Center. My reflection showed me the image of a woman I didn't completely recognize anymore. My hair was cut in a modern style that Victoria had suggested. I was wearing an emerald green dress that I had bought with my first salary as the center's coordinator. And for the first time in years, my eyes sparkled with something I had forgotten existed: purpose. The center had grown faster than we had imagined. In 3 months, we had helped 42 women find jobs. 26 had completed trade workshops, and 15 had formed a support group so solid they had become inseparable. But the most beautiful thing was seeing how each of them had recovered something they thought was lost forever: their dignity. "Ready for the big day?" Victoria asked as she entered my room. She had been my right hand in the whole project, helping me with the administrative aspects that I found more difficult. "More than ready," I replied, feeling an excitement I hadn't experienced in decades. "I'm excited." During these months, I had discovered talents I didn't know I had. It turned out I was good at organizing events, excellent at listening to women who needed to vent, and surprisingly effective at getting donations for the center. Theodore had told me I had a natural gift for inspiring people, and I was starting to believe him. As we headed to the center, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Mrs. Amelia, yes, who's speaking? I'm Emily from the television show Inspiring Women. We would like to interview you about your community center. Your story has gone viral on social media and we want to share it with more people." I was speechless. Victoria snatched the phone from me and scheduled the interview for the following week. "Amelia, you're going to be on television," she shouted as she drove. "I can't believe it," I replied, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. When we arrived at the center, a crowd was already waiting. Journalists, city officials, women who had benefited from our programs, and many people from the community who had followed our story. Theodore was at the entrance, impeccable in his blue suit, coordinating the final details. "Mrs. Amelia," he said with a huge smile, "are you ready to see your dream come true?" "Our dream," I corrected him. "This wouldn't have been possible without you." During the opening ceremony, several women from the center told their stories. Emily, 63, spoke of how she had found work as a pastry chef after decades of being a housewife. Linda, 58, shared how the support group had helped them heal after their adult children abandoned her in a nursing home. Hope, 72, proudly showed the crafts she now sold at the center's cafe. When it was my turn to speak, I looked at all those faces watching me with expectation and respect. For a moment, I remembered the humiliation I had felt at Grace's wedding when 200 people looked at me with pity or morbid curiosity. How different it felt to be seen for who I really was, instead of being judged for someone else's failures. 6 months ago, I began my own daughter kicked me out of her wedding. She told me in front of all the guests that I didn't deserve to be at the most important day of her life. A murmur of indignation ran through the crowd. That night I thought my life was over. I thought that without my daughter's love, I had no purpose, no value, but I was wrong. I searched for Theodore in the crowd, who smiled at me with pride. I discovered that my value didn't depend on one person loving or valuing me. I discovered that all the experience I had accumulated raising a daughter alone, surviving widowhood, working multiple jobs I could use to help other women who had gone through similar situations. I saw several women wiping away tears. Today, 6 months later, I can say with certainty that the woman who kicked me out of that wedding did me the biggest favor of my life. She forced me to find my own strength, my own purpose, my own chosen family. The applause was deafening. After the ceremony, as I received congratulations and took photos with the attendees, I saw a familiar figure at the back of the crowd. It was Grace. She looked different, thinner, with her undyed hair showing some gray and dressed more simply than I remembered. Our eyes met for a moment. She raised her hand in a timid wave but didn't come closer. I returned the greeting with a polite gesture and continued with the conversations. An hour later, when most of the guests had left, Grace approached. She walked with uncertain steps as if she wasn't sure she was welcome. "Mom," she said when she was close, "I wanted to congratulate you. This is incredible." "Thank you," I replied cordially but without effusiveness. "I've been following the project on social media. I'm so proud to see everything you've accomplished." "Proud?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "It's interesting that you feel proud of a woman you considered bitter and toxic." Grace looked down. "I've been in therapy as you suggested. I've learned a lot of things about myself that I don't like. I'm glad to hear that. Mom, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I now understand everything you sacrificed for me. And I understand why Theodore left me. I wasn't a good person. You weren't. Are you not anymore? I'm working on changing. I'm working on being worthy of all the love you gave me." I looked at her for a long moment. This Grace looked more humble, more real, more human than the perfect and arrogant woman I had known in recent years. "Grace, I'm glad to know you're working on yourself, but I want you to understand something very important. I no longer need your love to be happy. I no longer need your validation to feel valuable. I found my own path." "I know," she said with a broken voice, "and that's what hurts the most. That you had to find your worth without me when I should have been the one to remind you how amazing you are. If you've really changed, Grace, I'm happy for you. But our path back to each other, if it exists, is going to be long and will require much more than apologies. I understand, and I'm willing to wait as long as it takes." I watched her walk away again, but this time I felt neither pain nor guilt. I felt something like cautious hope. Theodore approached after Grace had left. "How does it feel?" he asked me. "Like a free woman," I replied, "like someone who finally understands that her story doesn't end with someone else's rejection, but that it's just beginning when she decides to write her own ending." That night, as I closed the center after the best day of my new life, I looked at the plaque we had put at the entrance. New Dawn Women's Center, where every woman can discover that it's never too late to start over. And for the first time in 67 years, I knew with certainty that my most beautiful story was just beginning. 2 years after the inauguration of the New Dawn Women's Center, I was sitting in my office reviewing the statistics that filled my heart with pride. We had helped over 300 women rebuild their lives. We had opened 2 more centers in neighboring cities, and my story had inspired the creation of a national foundation for invisible older women. The television interview had been just the beginning. Then came magazine articles, invitations to conferences, and finally a proposal to write a book about my experience. It's never too late to start over. It had become a bestseller, and the royalties had allowed me to expand our programs beyond what I had dreamed. But the most beautiful thing was not the numbers or the public recognition. It was seeing how women who arrived broken and defeated transformed into empowered versions of themselves. It was receiving letters from mothers who had found the strength to set boundaries with abusive adult children. It was knowing that my pain had served to heal the pain of others. That afternoon, as I was preparing my presentation for the International Congress on Active Aging, to which I had been invited as the keynote speaker, Victoria entered my office with a mysterious smile. "Amelia, you have a very special visitor. Who is it? You'd better go see for yourself." I left my office intrigued and headed to the reception area. There, sitting in one of the lobby armchairs, was Grace. But it wasn't the broken and desperate Grace I had seen on the opening day. This woman looked serene, with a peace in her eyes that I hadn't seen since she was a child. "Hi, Mom," she said, getting up. "I hope you don't mind me coming without an appointment." "Not at all. How are you?" "Good, really good. For the first time in years." We sat in the common area of the center, surrounded by the soft murmur of women working on their projects, talking in support groups, who had simply found a place to feel valued. "Mom, I wanted to tell you a few things. I've continued in therapy for these 2 years. It hasn't been easy, but I've learned to face things about myself that I had been avoiding my whole life. I'm glad to hear that, Grace. I've learned that my cruelty towards you came from my own insecurity, that I felt guilty for everything you had sacrificed, and that it was easier to make you the villain than to accept that I was an ungrateful daughter." Her words came to me with an honesty I hadn't heard in years. I've also been doing volunteer work at a shelter for battered women. At first, I thought it was to redeem myself with you, but then I realized I was doing it for myself, to understand what it really means to serve others without expecting anything in return. And how has it been going? It's been transformative. I've seen women who have lost everything and still have the strength to start over. They reminded me of you. Grace looked around the center, observing the activities taking place around us. When I see all this that you've built, when I read your book, when I see the interviews you give, I realize that I missed the opportunity to know an extraordinary woman. Not just as my mother, but as a human being. Grace, let me finish, please. I know I have no right to ask you for anything. I know I've lost the privilege of being your priority, but I wanted to ask you if maybe we could try to get to know each other again. Not as mother and daughter with all that toxic history between us, but as two adult women who maybe could be friends. I looked at her for a long moment. In her eyes, I no longer saw the arrogance or contempt I had seen for years. I saw genuine vulnerability, real humility, and something that took me a moment to recognize: respect. What happened with Theodore, I asked. He's married. He got married last year to a woman he met in a book club. She's a teacher who works with special needs children. She's perfect for him. And how do you feel about that? Happy for him. Really happy. He deserves someone who values him from day one, not someone who needs to lose him to realize what they had. Grace smiled with a sadness that seemed healed. Mom, I've learned that true love is not possessive. If I really love Theodore, I should be happy that he's happy, even if it's not with me. And if I really love you, I must respect the incredible life you've built without me. I sat in silence, processing her words. I'm not asking you to forgive me immediately, she continued. I'm not asking you to go back to how we were before, because before wasn't healthy for either of us. I'm asking for the chance to start from scratch. What would that mean to you? It would mean calling you once a week to ask how you are with no hidden agenda. It would mean inviting you to lunch when you have time if you want. It would mean respecting you as the independent and successful woman you are, not as the mother who must solve my problems. And what if I tell you I'm not ready? Then I'll wait. I've waited 2 years to have this conversation because I needed to be a different person before having it. I can wait longer if necessary. I looked around at this place that had become my home, my purpose, my legacy. I thought about the woman I had been before that horrible wedding, a woman who defined herself solely by her relationship with her daughter. And I thought about the woman I was now, a complete, fulfilled woman who had found her own light. Grace, I said finally, I think we could try, but on one condition. Whatever it is that you understand, that this new relationship, if it works, will only be a part of my life. It won't be the center of my universe as it was before. I have a full life now, with purposes and relationships that goes far beyond being your mother. I understand perfectly, and I think it's beautiful. Really, Mom, for years I was scared to have a mother who loved me so much because I felt it was too big a responsibility. Now it gives me peace to know that you are a complete woman, that you can be happy with me or without me. That frees me to love you without guilt. We sat in silence for a moment, watching the women of the center who laughed, worked, supported each other. Do you know what's the most ironic thing of all? I said. What? That in order to be a good mother to you, I first had to stop being your mother and become Amelia. A woman with her own identity, with her own dreams, with a life that was worthwhile regardless of you. And now can you be both? I smiled, looking towards the future that stretched before me, full of possibilities I hadn't imagined at 67. Now I can be whatever I want to be, and that, my dear daughter, is the most important lesson I can teach you. It's never too late to discover who you really are when you stop defining yourself by what others need from you. The next afternoon, Grace called me simply to ask how my day had been. We talked for 20 minutes about my projects, my travel plans, my new friendships. She didn't ask me for anything. She didn't need me to solve any problems. She just wanted to get to know me. And for the first time in decades, I felt that maybe, just maybe, we could build something beautiful on the ashes of what we had lost.